Hey y'all, cheap art supplies are not all they're cracked up to be, and I, someone who has spent way too much time reviewing cheap art supplies, will tell you why in today's art chat. Hey guys, I apologize for the very yellow lighting and the echo. I am recording in my great room. My old impromptu recording spot got kind of co-opted, so we'll see. I'll figure something out eventually. I didn't want to keep this from us having chats when the occasion arises. So I have been working on prepping for a watercolor class that I'm teaching to adults in Ascension Parish at the library system. And this got me kind of thinking about cheap art supplies versus expensive art supplies. So I have gotten comments here on the channel complaining about how many cheap watercolors I have been reviewing lately, you know, as part of the student grade showdown. And like, on the one hand, as a watercolor comic artist and an illustrator, I get those complaints. I like to totally understand why they feel like I'm wasting my time with this. And then as someone who is an art educator who often teaches people with less money, lower income families, children, teenagers, people who are just starting out who may not want to invest the money, it's important to me to know what is available. That's why I do Dollar Tree stuff, and I do Five Below stuff, and I do Walmart stuff, and I have done Temu stuff and AliExpress stuff and Wish stuff. It's really important to me. I think as somebody who grew up lower middle class and didn't have access, and that's very privileged in the US still, I acknowledge that, and in the world globally still, but my family didn't have the money to buy me a lot of nice art supplies, or for a long time, any nice art supplies. We weren't poor, but that was considered a luxury, and they didn't wanna, let me see if I can get a better shot. There we go. They didn't want to put that money in unless they knew for a fact this was something I was going to pursue, and even then it was like a really big deal. I remember my dad bought me the big Prismacolor anniversary box for my 19th, my golden birthday. I didn't get a car, I got Prismacolors, and that's when they were still pretty decent, and I was so over the moon. I still have that set, but I was over the moon to receive that gift. That was something I'd wanted for a long time. So like, my parents were supportive of me in that kind of like, we support you making art. We don't want to discourage you from making art, but you're never going to make any money. You understand that. And so that's also like, when I did the Comics Broke Me video, like, I probably should have caveated that I always knew I was not going to be rich. I didn't realize how poor I'd be, is the difference. So it's really important to me, as someone who grew up in semi-rural Louisiana, who only had a couple of art stores available, who didn't have a lot of money to spend, and this was kind of before online shopping really became what it is now. It's really important to me to think about those roots and to continue to review things that people who fall into those categories might find helpful. I also have viewers in other countries, so Amazon isn't always an option for them, or sometimes it's the only option for them. Buying things on Blick isn't always an option for them, but Jackson's Art might be an option for them. Or they might prefer if I buy things from AliExpress because it's what they have access to, what will ship to their country. So that's another reason I do continue to try to hit those areas. I also don't have any sponsors here on the channel other than my patrons, which makes this very expensive to do. Joseph and I pay for a lot of this out of pocket. I try to limit it to just what I earn from Patreon and not exceed that budget, but I do sometimes. But I don't have any sponsors. So on the one hand, it's very expensive to do, but on the other hand, I can kind of review whatever I think is interesting, or whatever you guys think is interesting, if I can afford it, or if someone's willing to send me a set that in fact, that's something I'm going to bring up more, but like, sometimes people will get a set that they bought in good faith and they didn't like it. And rather than throw it away, they reach out to me and they're like, hey, do you want to review this? And I almost always say yes, because like, one, free art supplies, 2, free content, and 3, it's just kind of fun. It's like we're collaborating, you know, like, so, or sometimes when I live near other artists, or it's feasible, we'll exchange art supplies for a period of time, so I can review them. So I am not necessarily in a position where I can only review higher end art supplies, higher end watercolor supplies, higher end drawing supplies, nor would I want to be. I grew up kind of broke. And I don't want to ignore that user base. A lot of impoverished people, a lot of people who come from lower incomes also enjoy art, also enjoy drawing, also want to make art. And while realistically, as an art supply reviewer, I know that if they can save up and buy the more expensive art supplies, it is going to make them happier in the long run. I realize most people don't have that kind of impulse control, you know, like, and also that's like a tricky wicket to be like, well, wait until you've saved up $200 to buy these nice watercolors to find out if you even like watercolor, because a lot of areas don't have art programming that's open to the public. So as you guys know, I do a lot of teaching with libraries. Currently, it has its ups and downs. And one of the things I like about it is the library pays me so the patrons don't have to. Those art classes are totally free to the public, which is why it is sometimes frustrating that I will have kid and teenager classes where they are amazing. They ask me questions. They're very engaged. They're very into the topic. And then I'll get adult classes where they signed up, they wanted to take this, where they won't engage with me, they won't talk to me, they won't ask me questions, they won't ask for help, they don't open up enough to benefit from it. So, but it's still important to me. I mean, that's why I do the tutorials, even though we all know, even Jazza has commented that tutorials are not the content of 2023. I still do that because I want to make making art accessible to as many people as I can, and I acknowledge that making something free at least removes that barrier to entry. However, I am also learning that if you charge something, people will value it more. So I just kind of wanted to like explain the situation with the cheap art supplies. Like even if Dick Glick decided to sponsor me tomorrow, and they were like, whatever you want to review and make a tutorial for, we will send it to you for free. It would still be important to me to continue to review budget things from AliExpress, things from Walmart, things from Dollar Tree, accessible things, to at least go and see what they have and talk about them. Because there's always going to be that person who wants to get into art, whether they are young and their friends are into art and they would like to get into art, or they are a teenager and they're on social media and some of their favorite creators are artists, or they've got a story to tell and they want to do the art themselves, or they've had a child now and they've had to quit their day job, their 9-to-5, and they would like to get into making art as a way of meditation and self-soothing and finding themselves again. Or they are even older than that and their kids are in school and they would like to make art as part of their daily ritual, or they're older than that and they'd like to get into art because their kids have left the nest and they want to make art. They have the time and the space and the energy to make this art, the money to make this art, or none of those things are true and they're juggling 1 million things, and art has always spoken to them and they want to be part of that process, part of this world that creates things for others to enjoy. I want to be able to have resources for them, and I would like to be able to talk to people when they come to me with questions, whether it's really high-end art supplies or whether it's really inexpensive art supplies. I want to be able to at least know what they're talking about, have experience with it, and be able to acknowledge it. So reviewing cheap art supplies can be a real drag, and I'll talk about that more later. But it's important to me still because it allows me to connect to people who need that connection, that early art encouragement. And I mean, through the choices I've made, whether it's my own life kind of interfering with my online life, or my own anxiety interfering with my online life, or just being busy or whatever, I have not been as shiny and as active and as attention grabbing as a lot of artists, good, bad, or indifferent. Like, I don't want to talk tea about other artists and, hey, people used to really want to watch that, and I never wanted to do that because I'd rather eat companies alive. I don't want to eat people alive. So like, I've kind of made my bed, but I would like, even if I'm like super unpopular, nobody's heard of me, no one has any respect for me, I'm just that comic artist schmuck who paints watercolor comics, I'd still like it to be a place for the fellow comic artist schmucks who would like to do watercolor, to like ask questions and hopefully find answers. And it isn't always the most expensive art supplies that are going to do that for you. Now, that said, let's talk some smack about cheap art supplies. So I was working on a class that I'm teaching this Saturday. Good luck convincing them to buy the materials I would like them to buy. They're not going to do that. I kind of understand why. In fact, the person I'm working with asked if I would like them to provide the paints. I said, no, I'll handle the paints, because what I like to do is I like to buy tubes of PWC. It only takes a pea-sized dot of each color. So while it would be more economical for me if I could convince them to invest in those paints and we just use those paints, I know they're going to probably bulk at the initial cost. So, okay, fine. I'll use them. I'll use those paints anyway, or I'll make kits with them. And they're nice quality paints. They're Shinhan's nicest grade watercolors, and my local brick and mortar David's Art Supply offers them cheaper than a lot of other stores, including Blick. So it allows me to give people this taste of professional grade art supplies and what those watercolors are supposed to be able to do without it totally breaking the bank. And without me strong arming them into buying something very expensive that they might not like. Now, even though I told them don't, they did buy paints. They went to Dollar Tree and got a bunch of the really cheap cake sets and asked me, well, won't this work? Y'all, I have reviewed so many of those sets. They are all garbage. So I very politely was like, no, let me handle it. I do kind of wish instead of buying a bunch of those sets, they would have just sent me that money to offset the costs. But there is definitely a difference between really cheap watercolors and nice watercolors. And it is sometimes a huge, huge difference. And I don't want to teach a class where I'm spending the entire class trying to teach them how to overcome the deficiencies that cheap watercolors have. I mean, I talk about this a lot in the Student Grade Showdown, where we have extenders and optical brighteners, and it's a false economy because they get used up faster because it takes more paint to get the saturation that you want, and they'll turn to mud quite often because there's those optical brighteners in there and they don't layer it as transparently and as cleanly as we might want, or they might lift up and reactivate in ways we don't expect, or they just cause problems. So basically, between me and you, if I am going to make recommendations on where to cut costs and where to spend money, you have three big arenas, okay? You got your watercolors, you got your paper, and you got your brushes. And generally, you can skimp on 2 out of 3, but you can't skip on the third. And it really kind of varies. Sometimes I'll use cellulose papers with really nice paints and decent brushes. Sometimes I'll use, I have nice brushes. I wouldn't call them very nice brushes, just because there are watercolor brushes that are in the hundreds of dollars, and the thought of paying $70 for a brush makes me want to cry. So I have a couple $20 brushes, but mostly I have silver, black, velvet, very nice but workhorse brushes that are going to last a while. So I guess I would say decent mid-range with a few Paul Rubens quills or Diane W/Artsy quills in there, but I don't have this really impressive watercolor brush collection. So I guess you'd say that's where I'd skimp. I don't really like synthetic brushes. I have found that of the affordable synthetic brushes on the market, Royal Langnickel Zen brushes, and that's what I recommend for my classes, because they're very affordable and they perform okay. They're okay. Don't get them at Michael's. They are very don't get anything at Michael's unless you have a coupon, because it tends to be very expensive. And I have friends who Michael's is what you got, and I get that. I'm not criticizing you. This is what we use in my classes, because if you buy them on Blick, you can get a bulk discount, and they're fair. These are $7.99 for, what size are you? A small mop. You can get the really big mops for the exact same price. So the Zen watercolor brushes are, don't buy your little brushes from these, buy your bigger brushes if you want that. They're okay. Are they my favorite? No. I would recommend them as a budget option though. So My brushes are kind of always middle of the road, but you know, these are the cheaper ones that I would recommend. Oh, I actually have my class materials like right here off camera. So this is what the PWC watercolors look like, for example. So it's a tube. I just taught a class of 15 and I told them to squirt a pea, and most of them squirted like a quarter, and we still have enough in here at least for one more class. So these are very economical for what you're paying and for the amount of paint. And I'm sure somebody in the comments is gonna like hate them, and you know, your mileage may vary, but I find they work really well for my classes because they handle the way I want professional quality watercolors to handle. I can do the glazing, I can do the layering. So that brings us to our paints. If I am teaching a class, it does, my personal feelings aside, I'm going to, if I can afford it, use professional grade paints with my students. I want them to have that experience. I want the paints to not be the thing we're troubleshooting here. I want them to, even if they're not happy with the art that they make, can't always guarantee that, I want them to see the potential in watercolor and to see the potential for themselves with using watercolor. Are they gonna stick with me and follow my YouTube channel and do my tutorials? Statistics say no, not really, but at least they will have had that first good hands-on experience. And that's another thing that some art supply stores will do, like hands-on art events. Like I think Art of the Carolinas has a hands-on art supply event that's open to the public, and then Plaza does hands-on creativity. And that gives you a chance to take workshops, to learn about the materials, and to handle the materials a little bit before committing to them. And I think that is wonderful. I would love it if my local brick and mortar did that, but I don't know that they have room to do that. Maybe if they did it in their parking lot, maybe I should start asking them to do that. But I got to participate both as an attendee of Hands-On Creativity and as a product rep at Hands-On Creativity. And I just think having a chance to mess around with the art supplies is so wonderful for selling those art supplies, and having an artist there to rep it is, I mean, come on, you're selling, it's like selling candy, you know, like it's super easy. It sells itself. It's like when I was in high school and we would sell the suitcases of Kit Kats and Snickers and things like that for ROTC. It sold itself. I was sold out in 2 days. So letting artists demo their favorite art supplies in person to people, letting us get passionate about it, letting us troubleshoot the areas they're having trouble with. Love it. I would do that as my day job if I could. Has been actually, that's one of the reasons I started the YouTube channel. That is my dream job. Is it going to happen for me in Louisiana? You know, it could. Yeah, it could. I could work for you, Golden. I could work for you, Holbein. I could work for you, Shinhan. Like, call me. Da Vinci, please call me. But a lot of people don't have access to that. So I want to use my classes. My goal is, especially with the adults, is to use my classes to give them that hands-on opportunity with those nice art supplies. Even if I cannot convince the libraries to buy the supplies I would like them to buy, because they are kind of pricey. And I know they're not going to have a bunch of other programs unless they hire me that use those materials. So paint is one of the things I don't skimp on. Even when I'm teaching kids, I use professional quality paints that don't utilize toxic pigments because the paints do what I want them to do. They behave in a predictable manner. And even if what we paint isn't what my demo looks like, the colors are going to be pretty. They're going to mix prettily. They're going to granulate. So it makes it more fun. And the paper is another area I don't like to skimp on. We can, that's a negotiable, but generally I like to work on Blick Studio cotton rag watercolor paper when I'm teaching classes, because for a cotton rag paper, it has gotten more expensive, which, like everything, which means it's time for me to raise my rates as a teacher, or for Blick to sponsor me, because I do use y'all's stuff in my classes, Blick. It performs well. It is a cotton rag paper. The cotton rag, I'm just going to use the demo I did for this class, okay? The cotton rag takes the color and like really reflects it. It's more saturated. It's more brilliant. You can do more layers. You can do wet into wet. You can do the real watercolor techniques. And cellulose is kind of picky about that. So like if I, if I had to skimp, the brushes I might be willing to skimp on and the paper I might be willing to skimp on, but we don't skimp on paint around here. Now, in my ideal world, minus comics, because I paint my comics on Canson Montval, I would be painting on cotton rag most of the time. I just like painting on cotton rag papers. I like I said, the Blick, and I like Canson Moulin de Roy, and I like Shizen, even though it's a very assertive paper. That's a lot of fun. So, I try to limit the problems, and I know about these problems. Why, y'all? Because I review garbage. I know what it's going to do, and that allows me as an educator to make choices that are informed by my experiences legitimately handling these materials myself, not just somebody else's word for it, which as a reviewer, I know I'm kind of like cutting my own tendons, but I have ADHD and I got to see for myself. I got to handle it myself. Because if I'm going to teach it, I got to know it, right? I say right, but like there are a lot of teachers who don't, and who will just parrot things that other people say and not credit them, or not go look for the original source. So I want to do a video about teaching as a gig art teacher, as an artist with 2 art degrees. And a lot of like behind the scenes professional experience. And I have a lot of salty things to say, so I haven't done it yet. I'm kind of waiting till I feel better as a person so I can temper it properly. I have foot and mouth disease, and I'm not looking to set fires, I'm looking to solve problems. So that experience with cheap watercolor supplies specifically allows me to explain why I don't like them, why I don't think they will work, why I think this professional brand is a better fit for you. It has also opened my eyes to brands I would not have tried. It has gotten me to rethink brands that I dismissed in the past and revisit them and have like kind of reevaluate my feelings about them. It has gotten me to do more. I'm never going to be the channel that talks a lot about light fastness, comic artist here, you know. I do work for reproduction, but in general, student grade paints in general are not going to be as archival. They're not going to last as long. They're going to start falling apart, shifting color, disintegrating because they're using cheaper versions of the same pigments. They're using extenders that might yellow. Maybe they're not using honey or gum arabic. They're using a different kind of binder that might eat through the paper. Also, with the student grade companies, a lot of them are not real honest about what they're putting into their cheaper watercolors. Even Winsor & Newton likes to be kind of cagey about who's manufacturing what for them and what is going into their Cotman line of products. So like even a well-known, fairly respected company is not going to tell you who they're white labeling their student grade line from. So I have found some winners that I like, and I talk about those a lot because it is really important for me to find, if there is wheat in that chaff, to find the watercolors that are affordable, that are good for students, that are good for beginners, and to be able to recommend them because I just want y'all to paint. I'm not really here to sell you something unless it's my comic or my original art. And I want you to be happy. I want you to enjoy art because I sincerely believe if there are more people who make art for fun, there will be more people who appreciate the work that goes into making art at all levels. And I'm so sick of people coming up to me and being like, I can't even draw a stick figure. Like, I've heard that every single show multiple times. Yes, you can. You can. I can teach you. The difference is you're probably not able or willing for whatever reason. I respect that, but to sink the time in to learning how to draw a stick figure. So with, some ability differences in terms of like physical abilities aside, you can learn how to do that if you legitimately want to and you put in a good faith effort and you're willing to sink that time in. And that is why often you have teenagers and younger tweens who are so good at drawing and they also don't get in their own way. Well, the teenagers can, but the younger ones will just draw. Like, they don't care if it looks bad. They will just draw. And that is the mindset to have. Whereas as adults, our time is more limited. We don't want to invest our time into something that might fail or might look bad. And that learning curve seems so much more daunting when you don't have that kind of free time. But you are capable of learning how to draw, most people. Now, is video your format? Maybe not. Is written your format? Maybe not. Are online classes your format? Maybe not. Is in-person your format? Maybe not. It's about finding a teacher who explains the material in a way you get and you like, that clicks with your brain and is memorable to you, putting that practice in and showing up and failing. But we're not here to talk about like learning how to draw. I mean, that was, I really sucked at drawing for like a long time. And I'm still not where I would like to be, but I'm better than I was yesterday, and I'll be better tomorrow. Every day I draw is a day that I get better, even if it's just a tiny amount. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with that. But I will be real with you guys. Like, I'm not gonna like pretend like the cheap stuff is the great stuff. And that, 12 secrets you don't know about like the major art supply companies. They're just here to trick you. But I'm also not like on wet canvas reading everything they say and believing everything they say and not finding out for myself either. You know, I exist in this like non-fine art space. If you guys watched my In Defense of a Large Palette video, you get me. But I will say that cheap art supplies typically have more problems to use. They have a higher learning curve. They are more frustrating. In a way, I feel like to make good art with cheap art supplies, you already have to be a good artist. And it frustrates me that those are the supplies that are labeled as student or beginner just because they're cheap. Whereas I think a smaller set of colors or a smaller paper size would be more appropriate for a student than like the same size, more colors, but way worse quality. Because when you think about someone who is just learning the basics of a medium, let's say watercolor, but it could be comics, you know, the only two that matter. And animation and game design, obviously can't ignore them. You're not looking to learn how to use all the colors. Okay, like with watercolor, you really want to learn your basic watercolor techniques, and you really only need like 2 or 3 colors to learn those kind of techniques, like wet into wet, wet over dry, and you want to learn color mixing. And for that, the basic 6 of the warm yellow, the cool yellow, the warm red, the warm blue, the cool blue, those will teach you a lot. So I don't understand why. Well, I do understand why, but I don't agree with the fact that many things aimed at students are cheaper, but they're garbage, because I've handled maybe over 100 different cheap watercolor sets. And I, as someone who teaches watercolor, would not wish most of them on my students because they're really not good. When I used to do watercolor classes at Plaza, I liked bringing in the professional and the student grade so that they could see for themselves, but we just don't have the time or the setup to facilitate me bringing in a bunch of my sets for people to use, because I just don't have enough for each person to get their own with the way the libraries like to set me up. I'd like to have just a big table and us work communally, but that's not exactly, always the most hygienic situation, although it does make teaching so much easier. Anyway, so basically, I wanted to talk about cheap art supplies. I wanted to mostly cheap watercolor, because I feel like I don't do acrylics and I don't do oils, so I can't talk about those. So in let's call it a trifecta of traditional media, color media, I know watercolor. That's the one I know. So I kind of wanted to just kind of talk about like why I've done so many student grade sets, why I keep doing student grade sets, even though I would like to be done with the student grade showdown. I do have some really nice professional grade sets that I want to review for you guys that I'm excited about. And it's like, I don't give myself permission. I haven't given myself permission to touch the treats until we finished with the not as nice watercolors. And I acknowledge that like I'm probably driving some people away with that, because like they have seen a bunch of bad sets. Like, why do they have to see one more bad set? Because I have ADHD and my brain is broken, and that is why, is the true answer. Because I have reviewed so many bad student grades, other than the fact that I already bought a lot of the bad student grade sets, so I'm trying to work through what I have. There isn't really a good answer. And also, like, I've kind of hit a routine with the student grade sets, and realistically that routine would work with the nice professional sets. There's not really a reason to deviate from the way I do my reviews. So maybe this chat will be the incentive I need to start talking about the professional sets again, because I'm getting left in the dust by like Lindsay, and her stuff is great and you should watch it. But I'm like, oh my, I've had that Magello, the smaller version of the set. I've had that Magello set for a year now, waiting for me to finish this other thing so I can pick back up my professional reviews. And then also part of what got me thinking about this is I feel like when I am talking about watercolor in person or with people I know who are not artists, they always ask leading questions. So like, for example, what do you think of Hobby Lobby? Well, to be really, I have opinions about Hobby Lobby, but as an artist, just as an artist, I don't like Hobby Lobby. I personally am not a fan of the brands they carry for the most part, or if they carry brands I like, it's usually not the quality that I like, and I think they're overpriced. Like, even compared to Michaels, I think they're overpriced. I can't think of any watercolor brands I like that are at Hobby Lobby. I'm sure you guys could list them out for me. I haven't been in a while, but like, I just don't love it. And like, every time I teach adults, they want to know about Hobby Lobby. And I'm not here to dunk on them. I'll dunk on Hobby Lobby, but I'm not going to dunk on them. But like, you go to dickblick.com. We don't have any association. I don't see any money from them. And look at their watercolors. Look how many different brands they have. Look at the price points they have. Start getting used to the idea of paying at least that much for your watercolor supplies. People will ask me about Michaels. Michaels is a little better. They do have some brands I like, but they're kind of expensive for what they are. And I'll just be real. Like, I've had friends who worked at Michaels, but in general, my lived experience is if I'm at Michaels and I'm looking for a specific thing in a specific, like, let's say resin. I want to learn about resin and I want to learn what's best. The people who are walking around who could help me don't know anything about anything I'm asking about, cannot help me at all. When I am at Michael's, if I'm in the watercolor section, I usually get roped into helping somebody else buy art supplies. And I don't mind. Like, generally, I don't mind. I like doing it. It makes me feel good to be able to help other people. But like, I don't feel like Michael's utilizes their in-store staff to the best of those people's skill sets. Because then I'll be checking out and the checkout guy will be like, oh man, I love these markers. They're so great, right? Like why are you at the checkout? Why are you not talking to people about markers? So that's my feelings on Michaels. And then I like buying, if I can, I like buying my art supplies in person. And you guys have heard me say nice things about David's Art Center like a million times because I really like them. I think their prices in general, sometimes I've overpaid for things. But I did that kind of willingly. Like, I knew what those mailings should cost. But generally their prices are really, really, really good. And the plus side to buying in person, often you can buy open stock online, but it feels more like a crapshoot. Whereas with buying at like a brick and mortar, you can like look at the in-person color swatches, not the color swatches that are a digital representation of what the color should be. And sometimes if they're really nice at that store, they'll let you swatch it, or they'll have like a physical swatch book that you can look at. It kind of depends on what you're looking at and what store you're at. Like, I don't know any store that would just let you swatch their oils. Watercolors are usually more like, yeah, they'd rather you not. But like pencils, they usually don't care at all. So we were talking about cheap art supplies, and I just kind of wanted to circle back that I review a lot of them because it is important to me to try and make sure that if someone is just getting into an art medium and they want to know about a certain brand, somebody's talked about it. I'd like it to be me. I really need to do more overviews of supplies again, but like, I'll be real, Joseph has done all of the moving stuff into this house, and I've done all of the I'm overwhelmed, I don't know what to do, dealing with family health issues, dealing with my own health issues, what? So I don't know where half the stuff is. I don't feel like I have enough room to do that, even though this house is much bigger than all the apartments I lived in. I just don't have it set up in a way to facilitate that. So like, I think that would be more helpful than reviewing 1 million bad student grade watercolors. I agree with y'all. I just haven't set up my setup to facilitate that. And student grade watercolors, regardless of what you might see looking at my thumbnails and just kind of without watching the videos, student grade watercolors in general are going to cause more difficulties than their professional counterparts, because in general they are manufactured to be cheaper. So they may not use half pans, they may use a cheap plastic lining, they may insist you use a water brush with them, and water brushes have their place, but they are not a replacement for a traditional watercolor brush. They may have more extenders, they may have optical brighteners to make them look appealing, and then they layer like hot garbage, or they fall apart when you try to mix them into secondary colors. They may have all the colors of the rainbow, but you just can't mix purple, or you can't mix skin tones, or you can't get them to do wet into wet blending like you would like them to do, even on a nice cotton rag paper. Or when you layer them, it scrapes the prior layer off, even on a nice quality paper. Or you run through the paints really quick and you're not really sure why you're running through these paints as quickly. So student grade can often be a bit deceptive. They're more challenging to work with than professional grade watercolors. And my recommendation, if you're looking to get into watercolor, if you want to start playing around with watercolor, is either buy a professional grade mixing palette, like the Da Vinci mixing palette, really like that palette, or the Core mini palette with the, they're almost like high chroma colors. But I love both of those palettes. Those are really great out of the gate watercolor palettes. That I would recommend, or put together your own. If it is price prohibitive, try to find some friends to split the tubes with and put them into half pans and let them dry and make mini Altoid tins palettes. We did that with Art Squad using Paul Rubens paints that they provided. Thank you very much. I like Paul Rubens a lot, so it was fun to be able to work with nice quality paints that I didn't have to buy. And we were able to do, we had 13 students plus me plus Sarah. So at least 15 of us made mini watercolor palettes to take home from just one set of tubes. And they weren't even the big tubes, they were the 5 milliliter tubes. So there are ways that you can do it that are economical, that will let you access nicer quality paints without spending that initial price. Also, a lot of companies, it costs, they don't send them out for free, but they'll do dot cards, like Daniel Smith does dot cards, Winsor Newton does dot cards, Blocks does dot cards, Da Vinci does dot cards, Schminke does dot cards. Some art supply stores will have the mini dot cards with only like 6 colors that they'll let you have for free if you explain that you want to get into watercolor. So there are ways to economically start playing around with this. You don't have to start with student grade. So please don't take all of my student grade reviews as me saying you don't need, if you want to get into watercolor and you want nice quality color results, you don't have to buy professional. You can buy student grade and get that. No, I don't feel that way at all. I would highly recommend you go professional watercolor paints from the get-go. Even if you're just trading dot cards with friends, even if one of you buys Winsor Newton, one of you buys Paul Rubens, one of you buys Daniel Smith, one of you buys Sennelier, and you'll all do dot cards and you swap to see which paints you like. Or my friend Heidi and I used to mail each other half paint. Actually, me, Heidi, and Kabocha, I was the common element. They didn't know each other. They would mail me half pans and I would mail them half pans in return. Like, there are communities you can get involved with. There are people you can talk to where you guys can swap these kind of samples. so that you can see what works for you. And that I would recommend over student grade. But I do want to give a nod to, you know, a past when art supplies they are still a luxury for many people, but they were very much a luxury for me. And the nicest watercolors I could afford to work with, even as a teenager, were Crayola watercolors. I still want to acknowledge those people. I still want to try to serve those people. Even if they can't afford to financially support the work that I'm doing, it is important to me that they have access to art supply information, art tutorials, and knowledge. I mean, like, a big part of me doing a lot of what I do is to provide you some of the basics of an art school education, especially if you guys like look at my archives and look at the drawing tutorials I've done and look at some of the painting tutorials I've done, because I have that master's degree in sequential art and I have that bachelor's degree in digital art, so that maybe not in lieu of art school entirely, but to fill in those gaps. And if you can't afford art school, to help with that. And there are a lot of people a lot of channels here on YouTube who are doing the same thing. So I think it's a common mission. And it's the same reason Joseph and I run the NATO scholarship when life is absolutely bonkers. It's not to pay a full ride scholarship. Like, we're just two people and he's the full-time working adult in this house, by the way. It is to help pay for some of their art supplies, or to just make that a little bit more feasible. It's just two people doing a service to try to help other people. We're not Mr. Beast, and we'll never be Mr. Beast, and I don't want to be Mr. Beast. I want to be me, and even doing a little bit helps. So that's why I will probably always do cheap art supply reviews, even if I hate the supplies, and I say so because people sometimes need to hear that. And sometimes I watch a lot of TikTok and I watch a fair amount of YouTube shorts, and I find that those platforms seem to think I like being lied to about art supplies, because that's what the algorithm is serving me. Is like, look how great this, I've reviewed this set, I know it's garbage, set is. It is so good. Like, so I feel like people are getting that misinformation. They are getting shown this really proficient and talented artist using these garbagey supplies and making a decent looking piece of art, and it kind of leads people to believe that they, as a beginner who don't have all that experience, should be able to do the exact kind of thing with those terrible art supplies. And it's like, no, it's not. They know a million tricks to weirding ways those art supplies into doing something great, and you don't yet have that skill set. So it's unfair to beat yourself up that you can't do the same thing. And I would not want bad art supplies to be the reason somebody checks out of art. There's a lot of reasons to check out of art. Like, to be real, the money is rough. People treat what I do like it's a joke, or like I live in a fantasy world, or aren't you so lucky, or like I should do it for them for free as like a service to them. They don't understand how money works. I have a lot of people who will be, I guess they like what I do because they watch enough of it, but they only ever say what they don't like about what I do. Comics is a grind that will kill you if you let it. You really have to fight with employers for job security, to get paid what you deserve, to have the materials you need and the environment you need to do what you're going to do. Like, I keep getting places that want to put me in a room with no sinks and they want me to teach a watercolor class like that. Like, there are reasons to leave art. It can be lonely, it can be isolating because you're head down working for long stints of time. It can also be wonderful and encouraging and community building. And I don't want art supplies to be the reason you check out. And honestly, when I was a teenager, art supplies were almost the reason I checked out. So I am trying to address some of my own lived experiences. I managed to talk for almost 45 minutes about cheap art supplies and other things. I hope you guys enjoyed hanging out with me. I'm recovering from a sinus infection, so I need to go drink a big old glass of water and rest my voice. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I do have a lot of professional grade watercolor reviews here on the channel. I look forward to when I can do more of them. I hope you find those helpful, useful, and informative. I hope you find my student grade helpful, useful, and informative. If you're looking for watercolor tutorials, I will link some of my favorite playlists that I've done in the description. I also have some really good beginner drawing tutorials. I'll link those for you guys, as well as some of my comic tutorials, because gotta represent. I hope you guys will check out my comic, 7-Inch Kara. You can read it for free at 7inchkara.com. Or if you're a fan of the Dead Tree format, a fan of 7-Inch Kara, or a fan of me, you can own your own copies by purchasing them through the Natto shop at nattosoup.com/shop. I also have art prints up there if you want to affordably own some of my art. I need to be better about listing my originals. So if there's ever been a piece of art that I made that you really like and you want to know about the availability, ask me or come find me at a show. And I teach in Louisiana. If you are a library that would like to work with me, I would love to teach comics for you. Comics, please. Comics, comics. So you can reach out to me at becca.hilburn@gmail.com. We're working on revamping my website to have the prices I should be charging to give you guys the quality of classes that you deserve. There's going to be one rate for existing classes. There's going to be a rate for developing new classes for you guys, because that takes about 2 weeks. And there's going to be a rate for classes where I need to provide the materials. That way everybody wins and I can pay my bills and you guys get awesome classes. So we're working on that. I'll let you guys know about that when it is up. And I also want to tell you guys that there are a lot of people here on YouTube who talk about art and talk about having an art career and give recommendations. I am the artist who has found 1,000 ways not to invent the light bulb, but I am never going to give you guys advice that a career advice that I have not experienced with, or a close art friend who I could reach out and ask them about right now, like call them right now and ask them about it. I'm not going to give you guys advice that I don't have experience with. If I ever do, I'm going to try to remember to caveat it as I learned this in art school, or I heard this from so-and-so, or I read this in such and such. I'm going to try not to present it like it's my own lived advice. I'm 37. I have been working in this industry for over 10 years now. And before that, I was in school. So I was working and going to school. And I've been drawing comics since I was 13. So I have a lot of experience, but I am far too young to have experienced everything. And I have found that every time I tell people that's not the way to do it, someone goes and proves me wrong and they do it that way. And I kind of live for that. Like, that's super exciting to see. And I was like that too, you know, when I was getting into comics, they were like, oh, nobody reads comics about girls. There's no such thing as children's comics. And I didn't get the opportunity to prove them wrong, but other people have, and that is awesome. So I don't like telling you guys what not to do, because if you want to break down that wall using your own head, go for it. Who am I to tell you? But I don't ever want to give you guys bad advice. I don't want to ever give you guys advice that I cannot vouch for. And I don't ever want to act like there is one set path in art. The people I find who like to claim there's a set path in art are just like parroting what they heard at school. They're parroting things that more established artists are saying. And while I don't think that's bad in one-on-one conversations, I don't want to steal somebody else's trappings and pretend like they're mine. So that's the viewpoint I kind of talk to you guys from, is I want all of the experiences I share with you guys about art and comics and watercolor to be very, very real and very valid experiences that I can talk to you guys about, that I have experience with, or a close person in my life has had experience with. So sorry, it's the sinus infection. So it's like, girl, you need to drink some water. Yeah, it's almost been 50 minutes, huh? So that's kind of where I come from. I am the eldest sister in my family. I am the eldest female cousin on my mom's side of the family. So like, being the big sister and being the auntie has been part of my life my whole life. So that's kind of where I want to come from with this. And obviously for my own career, I am not where I would like to be. I am not yet making I'm making the comic I want to make, but there's so many things I want to do and so many things I want to make and so many things I want to try and so many things I want to experience, and I'm only one person. So I'm not done yet, and I hope I can share that with you guys and we can form a community around it. So if you are looking for a friendly art community, I would encourage you to join the Paint Box. That is my art Discord server. That's my house. So I will try to remember to drop a link in the description. I haven't been linking it in every video. And it's actually not, I don't think it's set to public. I think it's like hidden on Discord because I don't want just like people who just want an art server where they can spam their art and run off. Like that is not what we do. It's a fairly quiet, slower paced community. So if you just want like a generally fairly friendly art community where you can share your art, geek out about art supplies, and just vibe with other artists, I think you guys will like the Paint Box, and it's free to join. So I never know how to end things, so we're gonna end that on there. I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. I hope you found this fun, if not helpful, useful, and informative, and I'll see you guys again really soon. Bye! Here's a little bonus of the carapages that I'm working on, and oh, this video mode does not like the colors I've got going on, but a little bit of authenticity for you guys. This is what I'm working on. This is my palette. It's full of professional grade watercolors. I talk about that in several other videos. So I hope you guys have a wonderful day.